Every year, I read a lot of books. Some are good, some are forgettable, and others make me question my entire state of emotional stability at 1:30 in the morning. These are those books, my favorite books of 2025. Books that made me cry, books that made me think, and honestly, books that reminded me of why I love reading in the first place. Hi, my name is Princess, and welcome to my channel where we judge books, not people. And this is a space where we talk about books thoughtfully and always from a budget-friendly, library-loving perspective. Today, I'm sharing my absolute favorite reads of 2025, the ones that stayed with me long after I turned the page. Let's start with a book that actually surprised me. Just for the Summer by Jimenez. So I have my summary of the book here, so that's what I'm going to be looking at. Hold on. So this story follows Justin and Emma, who connect online after discovering they share a strange and frustrating pattern. Every person they date ends up finding the person that they're going to be their soulmate right after they break up with them. They jokingly call it a curse, but it has deeply shaped how both of them approach relationship. Justin proposes that they fake date, which is my favorite trope. It's kind of cute, in order to break this curse, and so that they can be free of the curse and that they can go on about their lives and find the person that they're supposed to be with. What begins as a practical arrangement quickly becomes emotionally complicated when Emma temporarily moves to Justin's city and becomes integrated into his life. As their relationship deepens, both characters are forced to confront their families' histories, emotional wounds, and childhood trauma, and other ways they've learned to expect abandonment, which is the temporary relationship becomes a space where they must decide whether emotional safety is something they can trust or something that will eventually lose. I think what makes this book so compelling to me is the representation of avoidant personality disorder. As someone who has that disorder, I just felt like, I just felt seen. I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt represented. I felt like Abby was reading my journal. If you ever want to get to know me, read this book, because it is me. I am it. We are one. Both characters are anticipating impermanence. They've both internalized the belief that emotional stability is not for them. And so because of that, they approach their relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but all of their relationships, with emotional distance as a form of self-protection. When I was reading the premise for this book, I immediately thought that this was going to be some kind of like magical realism because of the curse aspect of it. However, the curse isn't a curse at all. It's not even really about fate or anything like that. It's about how they emotionally condition themselves. They recreate temporary relationships because permanence feels unfamiliar and unsafe for them. The plot gradually shifts from inevitability to agency, showing that the characters can choose vulnerability instead of emotional self-preservation. This book is really about breaking emotional cycles and childhood trauma, and learning that stability can exist without immediate expectation of loss. So as I was reading this, I didn't realize until like the middle of the book, or even like almost finishing with the end of the book, that this was an interconnected series that connected Part of Your World. And I didn't read them in order, so I read Part of Your World and then this book, Just for the Summer. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, I have to read Yours Truly. But that plot twist and realizing the connection was just absolutely amazing. Okay, so why this book is a 5 stars. The emotional depth, the avoidant personality representation of mental health, childhood trauma representation, and also realistic, to me, realistic relationship growth and actually trying to be an adult while also healing from your past and all of the things that come with that. I thought it was done realistically. It wasn't sugar-coated. It was hard, and sometimes, you know, feelings are hard and you have to confront those tough issues that make moving forward with your life really difficult. I thought that was done very well. That's why it's a 5 stars for me. This book is for anyone that loves romance, but with actual real life trauma and dealing with that trauma and what that looks like. Trying to be there for your partner, but also accepting someone else's help and not pushing people away. I like romances like that. I don't like the fluff is fine sometimes, but other times I want like a real contemporary romance. My next 5-star read for 2025 was Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. So I'm gonna read the summary. This follows Bree, who arrives in a small town in Maine seeking escape from a traumatic event that has left her emotionally fractured. She hopes that distance and anonymity will allow her to rebuild her sense of safety. There, she meets Archer, a reclusive man who has lived most of his life in an isolation due to a traumatic childhood event that left him unable to speak. Archer lives on the outskirts of town, disconnected from the community due to both a misunderstanding and intentional exclusion. As Bree slowly gets to know him, she has become one of the only people to truly see him beyond his silence. Their relationship develops through patience, trust, and shared vulnerability as both characters begin to confront their past rather than continue to run away from their pain. I love this book so much. It is more emotionally vulnerable than your normal everyday contemporary romance. Archer's inability to speak, his silence, it's not just physical, right? It's social, it's emotional. It's his inability to emotionally connect to other people, his isolation. Because Archer exists outside normal systems of communication, which forces the reader and the story to focus on the emotional presence rather than the verbal expression. His character challenges the idea that someone's worth is not tied to someone being understood. The story moves slowly at first, but that's to build a two-way trust system, right? Like both of the characters need time to trust each other, but it also gives the reader time to get to know the backstory of both of the characters and both of their trauma and what they went through. And that takes time. The healing that's done by both of these characters in this book doesn't come from some big dramatic event. It comes from a consistent vulnerability, consistently showing up for one another, and that creates a sense of safety for them. This book asks the question of whether or not does someone deserve to be loved as they are, or do we change them to fit our narrative? This book portrays intimacy without forcing transformation. This was a 5-star read for me. One, and most importantly, is it was just so tender. Archer was just like this little cub that I just wanted to hold and protect and love and cuddle and snuggle with. The tenderness of this story was just so good. This is for the romance reader or even contemporary fiction readers. If you are sick and tired of the macho, bravado MMCs and you just want a tender, broken bird, a man that just needs love and care and tenderness, that's this book. That is definitely, this book is for you. If you don't want a big tough guy MMC, you just want the vulnerability. I love this book so much. Next, we have Beg, Borrow, and Steal by Sarah Adams. Surprise, surprise, another romance, right? This centers around two main characters. I'm going to read the summary. Centers around two characters whose lives and ambition continually place them in opposition of one another. Their relationship begins with frustration, competition, and emotional guardedness. Circumstances force them into close proximity, creating situations where avoidance is no longer possible. As they continue interacting, their assumptions about each other begin to shift. What initially appears as antagonism reveals deeper emotional complexities, including shared fears, insecurities, and desire for control over their own lives. Their evolving relationship forces them to reconsider not only each other, but their own emotional defenses. First of all, the banter. The banter in this book was it wasn't just good, but both of them are teachers, right? And I like verbal sparring between two characters. I absolutely love when two intellects can get in the ring and go bar for bar. That is my favorite trope in banter romance books. If it's just light punches here and there, like, oh, that's cute. Like, I want you to hit below the belt. I want some verbal sparring. I love that in this book. Both characters rely heavily on independence as a way of it's a part of their identity. This book explores how intimacy destabilizes identity and how love requires surrendering your emotional control. This was a 5-star read for me because this book shows realistically the emotional resistance and vulnerability someone can have and how banter can be used as a defense mechanism. And I like sometimes sarcasm, it's a defense mechanism, right? It's a coping mechanism. And this really does a great job of exploring how two intellectual beings, educators, use that to keep love at bay, keeping people at bay. And it was funny and charming, and it was done realistically. 5 stars for me. Okay, again, another romance, but a good one. One that is actually new in my repertoire. This is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. I think that's how you say her last name. This follows a brilliant woman who is autistic. She hires a male escort to teach her about intimate things, and feelings become complicated given his background, but also how she deals with social interactions. This is my first neurodivergent, romance book, and I absolutely loved this book. I really appreciate how, look, everyone wants this, right? Everyone wants love, everyone wants companionship and partnership and everything like that, right? But this book helps someone who's not neurodivergent understand and have the empathy to see how someone can be challenging in this part in their life. It's more about the reader to understand how difficult it might be in social situations, or touch sensitivity, sound sensitivity. And so because of her autism, she approaches all relationships with a sense of analytical predictability, because emotional unpredictability feels unsafe for her. So by hiring a male escort, the transactional nature feels safe in the beginning because it's clear and she knows exactly what she wants and what she's going to get out of it. There's a safety in knowing the clarity. This book challenges the conventional ways of emotional expression. I, not being autistic, am used to a very, again, conventional way of what love feels like and what it looks like and what it sounds like, and kind of stepping out of that and being put into how difficult and different it must be to try and put yourself out there. She wants love and companionship, but she has all of these differences, we'll call them, that make it challenging for her. And I love that. I absolutely loved getting a different perspective on how someone who is completely different from me, who wants the same things as me, but has difficulty in expressing themselves, either verbally or having issues with social interactions, meeting family, meeting their friends. That's all very difficult for her, and she's trying to be normal. And what does conformity look like for different people, and challenging, confronting conformality in order to be loved. This is a 5-star read for me because 1, the neurodivergent representation, 2, it's sweet, it's steamy, and it's character driven. It's not so much tropey at all, I don't believe. It's a refreshing take on a contemporary romance. It portrays emotional intimacy and vulnerability with nuance and respect to neurodivergent representation. This book is great for anyone that loves romance but wants a different trope, that wants something that is not like any old other type of romance book. The neurodivergent rep in this book was absolutely chef's kiss. I could not recommend this book more, especially if you're a romance girly. If you're a romance girly or a guy and you just want something fresh, this is it. The next 5-star read for me is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. Okay, so here's the quick story, the quick summary of the book. This is about Linus. He is a caseworker responsible for evaluating orphanages that house magical children. His job is to ensure that these children do not pose a threat to greater society. He lives a quiet, isolated life defined by routine and a strict adherences to the rules. He is assigned to investigate a mysterious orphanage located on a remote island, home to children, hilarious children, considered especially dangerous or unusual. As he spends time observing the children and their caretaker, Linus begins to question everything he's been taught about safety, normalcy, and belonging. His experiences challenge his worldview and force him to reconsider the role he plays within the system he's always trusted. So Linus begins in this story as emotionally passive. He defines himself through institutional systems. His identity is strongly rooted in order, predictability, neutrality. He's very passive. But neutrality becomes morally uncomfortable for him once he becomes connected to these children on the island. His transformation represents the rejection of emotional detachment and in favor of emotional responsibility. This was a 5-star read for me because 1, it's wholesome, the whole found family, the banter, the wit, the humor, the social commentary on different people fitting in, accepting one another for our differences. It also shows emotional awakening and moral growth. This is a great cozy fantasy. This is a book for people that like social commentary. This is a great book for people that love good banter and humor. That's just funny. That's just a good, clean, good time. Up next, we have Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. Okay, so summary. The story follows Rory, a woman whose life feels directionless and emotionally stagnant. Am I right? She returns to her hometown temporarily to help her pregnant twin sister, a relationship that is already strained, but years of unresolved resentment and emotional distance. Rory feels disconnected from her family, her romantic relationships, and her sense of purpose. One night, after an encounter on a dark road, Rory is attacked by something she cannot fully explain. In the aftermath, she begins experiencing physical and emotional challenges she cannot control. Her body feels unfamiliar, her emotions feel amplified, and her sense of, the way I love this book, I did. And her sense of identity begins to fracture. As her transformation progresses, Rory must navigate her relationships with her autonomy and her understanding of herself while confronting the reality that she is becoming something fundamentally different. The story follows not just how physically transformation, but her psychological transformation forces her to confront parts of herself she has long suppressed. Okay, first, before I get into like the breakdown of it all, two things that I think, so there's some, I don't want to say mixed reviews, but I don't think people liked this book as much as I did. First and foremost, this is femme rage all the way, through and through. So the two things that I think, especially on like Goodreads, one is the horror and the romance aspect of how it's categorized. I wouldn't call this horror. Definitely paranormal, but not horror by any means at all. There's like one scene where it's a bit like, oh, she turns into a wolf and she gets attacked. Like, ooh, creepy, scary. Like that's it. Everything else is not horror. Not even close. Secondly, the romance. I wouldn't technically categorize this as romance just based off how the publishing industry categorizes romance, right? There's a formula to it. And I don't think this book fits that formula personally, but I still love the romance aspect of it. I'm just saying, if you're going into this looking for horror, this is not that book. And then also, if you're looking for romance, this is also not that book. However, the romance aspect of it, I liked the portrayal of this romance relationship being the back burner, right? Like, she has all of these other issues. She's dealing with childhood trauma, relationships with her family, her job, her purpose, and she's turning into a wolf. She has all of these other things, and a man coming in is not going to save her, and he doesn't. But I like the realism of that. Like, there's no man that's going to come in and swoop you off your feet and fix all of your problems, and love cures everything. That's not this at all. She still wants love. She has someone that she's dating, and they're falling for each other. But that subplot is in addition to this woman who has these whole life, right? And I like that aspect of romance. I don't really like when a book categorizes a woman's whole life into, she fell in love and that's the whole story. She's a whole 3D, broken, sarcastic woman that has all of these problems, and yet she still has romance intertwined in all of these problems. I love that. I love that you can still be broken and turning into a wolf and still on the back burner deal with the romance part of your life. Rory's transformation externalizes emotional states she's previously suppressed: rage, resentment, and dissatisfaction. Her emotional volatility, it's not new. It's newly visible and impossible to ignore. Her character has spent most of her life minimizing herself to maintain socially acceptable. The loss of control she experiences becomes a form of honesty, forcing her to acknowledge the anger and pain she has internalized. It explores feminine rage, emotional authenticity with psychological depth. Okay, next is The Reformatory by Miss Du. Okay, Summary. This story follows Robbie, a 12-year-old boy living in the Jim Crow era, Florida, where after defending his older sister from harassment, Robbie is unjustly arrested and sentenced to a segregated reform school known for its brutality. The school operates under the guise of discipline and rehabilitation, but in reality, it functions as a system of control and abuse. Robbie is separated from his family and forced into an environment where cruelty is normalized and survival depends on obedience. As Robbie navigates the institution, he begins to encounter supernatural elements, haints, that reveal the lingering presence of those who have suffered before him. These encounters force him to confront the reality that the violence within the institution extend beyond the present moment. The story follows Robbie's psychological and emotional struggle to maintain his sense of self and humanity in a system designed to erase both. This book has been on my TBR for quite some time, but because of the name, it's a very heavy book, and I was never really, I never really felt ready to dive into such a heavy read. I knew it was going to be good. I just knew it. I just wasn't ready for what I knew it was going to serve. And it did everything. It made me think, it made me cry, it made me angry. Such a 5-star book before I even read it, but it took me a minute to actually pick this book up because it's heavy. It is. He's 12. He's 12. The protagonist's innocence contrasts sharply with the brutality in this institution, emphasizes the unnaturalist systematic violence. There are supernatural elements in this book, but the haints represent a manifestation of historical trauma rather than a distraction from the events of what's actually happening in this institution. Robbie represents innocence forced into premature awareness. His perspective allows the readers to witness institutional violence without normalization. The reform school itself functions as a symbol of systematic injustice. Its cruelty isn't portrayed as exceptional. It's portrayed as structurally embedded. The haints, or the supernatural elements of the story, represent a historical memory. This book examines how an institution maintains power through isolation, fear, and dehumanization. Robbie's psychological resilience represents resistance. And again, he's 12. This isn't just a horror story. It's a story about survival within a system designed to destroy someone's identity. This book is a 5-star read for me because it's powerful, it's haunting, it's emotionally heavy. It confronts historical and institutionalized violence with emotional honesty and gravity. This book is literally for everyone. Everyone should read it. The next 5-star read for me was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. So I'm not gonna go in depth of all of my thoughts on this book because I'm gonna mention it again in my next video. But yeah, here's the summary of this book. Eleanor lives a highly structured and isolated life. She works the same job, follows the same routines, and avoids emotional intimacy whenever possible. She believes she is completely fine, don't we all? Even though she has no close relationships and minimal social interactions. Her emotional detachment is disrupted when she develops an attachment to a man she barely knows, creating a fantasy relationship that reflects her desire for connection. Ugh. Around the same time, she forms an unexpected friendship with a coworker whose presence introduces emotional unpredictability into her life. As Eleanor's carefully controlled emotional world begins to shift. She's forced to confront the reality of her past, and what a past, and the way she has structured her life to avoid emotional pain. This story follows her gradual emotional awakening and her struggles to reconcile her self-perception with reality. My God, this book. Eleanor's emotional distance with people is about her being able to protect herself. Her emotional distance allows her to exist without confronting her painful past. Throughout the book, her healing occurs gradually as the story unfolds, as the story goes back into her childhood. There's a lot of childhood trauma, and it's gradually through small moments, not in a dramatic breakthrough. This book portrays loneliness with psychological realism and compassion. We have to have a lot of empathy. I'm not going to go too much into it because I have a whole debrief in my next video about this specific point about loneliness and how this book portrays compassion for this main character. Eleanor's emotional detachment is a coping mechanism. Her routines, as rigid as they are, they provide some type of safety. They provide some type of psychological perceived safety by eliminating unpredictability. Her narrative perspective reveals how childhood trauma can reshape someone's identity and self-perception. She herself doesn't identify as being lonely or isolated. She sees herself as being self-sufficient and stable. The most honest and realistic part about this book is her emotional growth occurs through exposure to connection rather than intentional self-improvement. In other words, she's having all of these experiences with her newfound friend from work, and that connection, that relationship, that friendship is accidentally helping her deal with her childhood trauma. And it's often very uncomfortable for her and also her friend and the reader. Eleanor's journey isn't about becoming someone new. It's not about going on a healing journey. It's about allowing herself to deal with her childhood trauma, allowing herself to exist as someone emotionally present. This book was a 5-star read for me because of the mental health representation. This book is for the depressed. No, just kidding. This book is a great way to expand your own empathy for someone else's struggles through literature. I think this is a great way to expand your own compassion for someone else's inability to cope with being human. So close. We're almost there. The next read is Witchcrafts for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. Okay, summary. This story takes place in a home for unwed pregnant teens where the girls are sent to live in isolation from society. The institution operates under strict control, dictating every aspect of their lives, reinforcing shame and obedience. The girls exist in a system designed to strip them of autonomy and identity. Their futures are decided for them, and their emotional experiences are dismissed and controlled. When they discover witchcraft, it becomes a tool through which they can reach their agency over their lives. Their use of witchcraft represents not just rebellion, but of self-definition. As their power grows, so does their awareness of the system that has controlled them, forcing them to confront the psychological and emotional consequences of their confinement. The way this book this book was just so good. This book is a great example of I'm going to speak for all readers. We don't just like to disassociate or escape. And we do, but a lot of it has to do with experiences that other people might have. I'm not a teen mom. I don't even know any teen moms. So this story was not just eye-opening and created compassion and empathy and all of those things, but an eye-opening experience for something that I know nothing about. And it completely shattered my, I don't want to say my opinion of teen moms, but especially in the time that this was historical fiction, so 1960s, 1970s, and the whole women's rights and birth control and that whole thing, that movement. The witchcraft in this book symbolizes agency in a system designed to take away their autonomy. Their transformation throughout the book reflects psychological empowerment and resistance. The institution of which they're sent to represents systematic control over female autonomy. They are sent to this home where the girl's lack of power is structural, it's not personal. And because the witchcraft symbolizes reclaimed agency, the ability to influence their own lives rather than existing as passive participants. And so their transformation has to first become psychological before it becomes supernatural. They begin to see themselves as individuals rather than subjects to control, or that should be controlled, or that needs to be controlled. The book explores how systems maintain power through controlling identity, ignorance, education, and how reclaiming identity and learning about oneself, their bodies, that identity disrupts that power. And because this, again, is historical fiction, this takes place, I believe, 1960s or early 70s, I believe 60s. There's a growing movement for, women's education, and not just in a generalized way, but women's health. And being educated about your own body. And there was just so much, we need to make sure that these girls are ignorant of what they can do and what their bodies are and autonomy, so that we can now treat them this way and they don't really know what's going on. There were so many scenes in this book where they couldn't speak up because they didn't understand what was happening to them. They didn't understand what was going on. They were just completely ignorant to what their bodies are and what they can do, and sex and having pelvic exams and all of these things that they were just unaware of, and also didn't have the vocabulary to ask questions or to say no, or I don't want that procedure, or any of these things. It's, if we can keep people ignorant, then it's easier to control them. This is another FemRage book that is a 5 stars for me. I really enjoy the social commentary. It explores power, it explores autonomy, and the resilience with emotional and therapeutic death. This is a 5-star read for me because it explores, I think, FemRage from a younger perspective, and so that was refreshing. Last but not least, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Summary. Okay. Jane Eyre is an orphan who grows up in an environment defined by emotional neglect and cruelty. From childhood, she develops a strong internal sense of self, even when external circumstances deny her dignity and autonomy. As she grows older, 18, 19, she becomes a governess at Thornfield Hall, where she develops a complex emotional relationship with her employer, Edward Rochester. The relationship challenged her understanding of love, autonomy, and identity. Throughout the story, Jane is repeatedly forced to choose between emotional security and self-respect. Girl, Her journey takes her through multiple environments, each testing her psychological independence. The story follows her development into a person who defines herself internally rather than through external validation. Aren't we all on that journey? Jane Eyre is a surprising 5-star read for me. I didn't know I was going to. I didn't know the depths of how her story just ebbed and flowed throughout her years. And I was just so surprised. I was really surprised by how well, not just how well written it was, but how thorough you can examine someone's life through all different, even though she's young. I mean, at the end of the book, she might have hit like 20, you know, maybe 25. But still the maturity of how she handled people's disrespect, how she handled herself with poverty. I mean, she just always had her head up, you know? Jane Eyre is just a great way of just, you know, examining self-respect from a literary perspective. Jane Eyre's defining trait is her psychological autonomy. I loved how she refused to sacrifice her identity for emotional security. Her whole journey is about maintaining her self-definition of who she is without falling under external pressures. Okay, so the age gap is not my favorite, but it is what it is. She's like 18, 19, and her employer is like 45. However, like that aside, she had this man groveling for her. You know what I mean? Like, he was begging. He was so madly in love with her. Ugh. It made the age gap just kind of like, okay, I'll get over that. Groveling, begging, don't leave me, Janet. Don't leave me. I need you. I love you. What do you want? I'll give you anything. And she still said, peace, I'm out. I'm not dealing with that. If you know what I'm talking, that. If you've read the book, you know you know. And I love that. I loved how just she stood her ground. She went out and explored. His love was real. Ugh, it was just such a good book. It was surprisingly good. It was surprisingly a 5-star read for me. Jane Eyre is chef's kiss. These 10 books didn't just entertain me, they surprised me. They all made me feel something different. Joy, devastation, they made me think, they made me more empathetic, compassionate. They made me feel seen and represented. If you've read any of these books or loved any of these books, let me know. Or maybe you didn't love these books, which is totally fine. You know what I mean? This is where we judge books, not people. I'm totally fine if your taste is what it is. I'm always down to discuss in the comment section respectfully. And those are my reads, right, for 2025. That's my video. You're enough. Okay, thanks. Bye. This book examines how institutions maintain power through isolation and fear and dehumanization. This book examines how institutions maintain power through dehumanization. This book examines how an institution maintains power through fear and isolation and dehumanizing someone. Oh my God, why can't I say this word? Dehumanization, 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 dehumanization. This book examines how institutions maintain power through isolation, fear, and dehumanization.